I think women are balancing way more things than ever, thinking about their health, their kids. Information is just coming at us so quickly. She could convince herself just to stay in survival mode. We don't stay in survival mode. We thrive.
What would make it easier for women to ask for what they need? We're supposed to keep the house perfect, make the money, raise perfect children.
That whole story of like, we're supposed to be these perfect people, that's the outside story. That's what's happening in magazines. That's what's happening on Instagram. That's not true. It is what has been marketed to us, mostly by men, because it's like their desire.
It's
their
it's their
dream.
dream.
It's their
I'm
dream,
so
right?
glad you said that.
I'm an entrepreneur, which means I have a different idea at every moment, but I really want to fulfill some of those dreams that are constantly queuing themselves up in my head. And so I've found a way that actually responds to who I am as a woman, that comes from a more feminine energy, that really allows me to get things done.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Mia Moran, CEO of PlanSimple and best-selling author of PlanSimple Meals. Mia, so happy to have you
Oh
here.
my
Thank you for
gosh.
coming.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
I know. So before we start, can you please tell everybody what is it that you do and who do you help right now?
Right now. Got it. So right now, I help women who usually are mothers and entrepreneurs. And we used to talk about just balancing those two things. But at this exact point in history, I think women are balancing way more things than ever. So often those same women are thinking about their health because, after kids, we have to do that.
Mm.
Oftentimes they're inheriting a parent or, somebody in their family who they need to caregive for as well. We are living in a crazy time. And so there's a lot of that. And then information is just coming at us so quickly. So I feel like the average woman who's an entrepreneur is taking on sort of these other caregiving roles, just has so much to balance. And so I help that woman really do that and really show up for her full life at a time when possibly she could convince herself just to stay in survival mode. We don't stay in survival mode. We thrive.
But you didn't start out for you doing PlanSimple. You woke
No.
up one day and PlanSimple was born. We actually met while you had your own graphic design firm.
Yes.
So before PlanSimple even became a thing, can you help us understand what was going on in your life at the time that we met when you had your graphic design firm?
Absolutely. So apparently I've always been meant to be on this path of entrepreneurship. That was pretty clear pretty quickly. So I did have two jobs at one point after graduating from college. So one was an amazing opportunity because I was in a small firm that operated a lot like the one I eventually opened. And so I got to see a lot really quickly, whereas a lot of my friends who went off to bigger firms weren't getting as much hands-on experience. And then I sort of jumped into the .com situation right before it burst. When I jumped into that second situation, I felt very like not creative. And I was just working for banks and just places that I didn't want to be.
Fun.
So fun. So over the course of that time there, I would take on all these little side projects because I was a designer. And eventually one day I was like, okay, I have two jobs. This was before kids, so I could handle it. And one day I was like, I think I could do this. So I quit that job and opened up a design studio. And it was about, I was in my 20s. So it was before I had kids. It was before I was married. But pretty quickly I got married. And I don't know the exact timeline, but it was pretty much within 2 years I had my first kid. So my kids were basically born while I had this firm. And I set it up just in a way that really served me. We had a babysitter, you know, they would come and I could like nurse at the office. I felt like it was really amazing. So after my third was born, we were sort of doing amazing. Like I had a staff, I had partnered with a tech firm. We were doing really well. And I, though, was exhausted. I was really tired. And the most tangible thing I could put my hands on was that over the course of pregnancies and nursing, and I have three kids who are 5 years apart. So it was like 5 years of all that.
Yeah.
And I had gained a lot of weight in my pregnancy and I hadn't lost it. So I was like, oh, well, maybe it's really time to get healthy. And I had this insight on this day where it was like 3 o'clock and I was thinking about heading home to like go make dinner, be with the kids, whatever. I'd had a full day of work. And I looked across my desk and there was like this stack of maybe 7 Starbucks coffee cups that I had pretty much got and purchased since 9 o'clock that morning, and it was like this combo of, like, I love talking to the Starbucks lady. She made me feel like I had a friend, and I had caffeine, and I had thought that Starbucks coffee actually had extra caffeine, and I was just exhausted. So I was like, first of all, how have I left the office this many times? Like, how is that even appropriate to a day at work?
Right.
But second of all, like, why is the caffeine not affecting me? And that was sort of like this breaking moment where I decided to get healthy. And the move to get healthy just led me, it was like one thing led to another. I, like, went to a yoga studio, I introduced myself to the woman there, she explained this path I could take, and my road to health was very, I mean, it kind of reminds me of entrepreneurship. I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was simple, and so it really worked, and I got really quick results, and I felt really amazing really quickly. Like, I tell people by the end of the second week, I kind of felt like I had had 15 years of therapy. Like, I had so much energy. I was showing up better at home. I was showing up better at work. It was just this amazing thing. So as a designer, and this was roughly, I can't remember years, but it was at the time before like WordPress existed, before Instagram existed. Like, so there was blogs. A lot of the stuff around food, like none of that whole Pinterest thing had happened yet. So a lot of the things around food were really ugly. A lot of it was very like hippie
Mm-hmm.
in theme. And so as a designer, I was like, "Oh, I should do something about this. If I'm feeling this good, like everyone deserves to feel this good." So I started this magazine because that was my thing, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I was basically creating a really expensive hobby.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point it was taking enough time that people in the office were like, "What's happening, Mia? Like, what are you doing all day? Like, don't we have this thing to do or that thing to do?" And my heart just like wasn't in it anymore. And I think that's a really important part of the story because I think often we talk about the journey from corporate to entrepreneurship. And I know you have something similar that it was like different levels of entrepreneurship.
Right.
And I think that that's really important because I felt really bad that I had created this amazing thing that I should possibly want anything better, like, so there was this moment where I was like, I knew I had to sort of make a choice, like, I had to lean into this other thing, and so eventually I did, and I wrote a book, and I still was a little bit hobbyish, but I decided to go on a book tour with the book because it became a bestseller, and I took my kids out of school, and at that time, it was called PlanSimple Meals, so we were really food focused, but eventually on the book tour, I talked to thousands of women, and I kept being like, especially in California, where everyone's just beautiful and knows a lot about kale. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, why are these people here to learn from me? Like, I just learned about kale like 2 years ago. Like, why are they like hearing me talk about dinner? And over the course of time, it became really clear that it was time. It was that nobody was able to make time. Like they knew that they wanted to go to the farmer's market. They knew they wanted to sit down with their kids. They knew they wanted to like feel better and be healthier, but it was just everybody was scrambling. And so that's when I was like, "Oh." And it was kind of like the dots connected because to be honest, in design school, I had done all my whole thesis about time. And so it was like I just hadn't figured out that was the next jump. So I had to take all these steps and I don't know that I would have known to do what I'm doing now if I hadn't had each of those steps, but that was basically the journey.
So much to unpack there, but I am extremely impressed that through one aha moment, your entire life changed,
Yeah.
right? You did lose something like 65
Yeah.
pounds in that journey. And for so many people who struggle with that, who know that they're not being the healthiest, it's so much easier to just look at your life and be like, well, it is what it is, and I can't change it until my boss starts to treat me nicer,
Yeah.
or until my husband starts to pick up and do dishes every once in a while. Like it's very easy to just point at our situation
Yeah.
and say, unless that changes, well, there's nothing I can do about me.
Yeah.
Instead, you took it the complete like 180, like, no, let's just do it and let's lean in. So I am very curious to know, what do you think made you like really make that turn? If somebody's hearing you right now and they have those 65 pounds on and they want to get rid of them, what do you think is the thing that is going to click for them to realize that there's a better way?
Well, first of all, the first thing you shared was about really taking personal responsibility. So I just had this moment where I was like, okay, there's nobody else who can change this besides me, right? And it was at a time when things were happening, like who's gonna make the kids dinner, like we were both kind of stressed. And for whatever reason, the actual moves I took when I made this choice actually took more time away from what I thought I was supposed to be doing, because I had to really focus on myself. I had to really focus on my habits. And actually at that exact day, one of the first moves that I made was I pretty much was either at work or at home. And when I was at work, we had a babysitter because there was 3 kids and it was a much better deal than
Mhm.
daycare. So I had 3 kids with a babysitter, and I was either doing one of those 2 things. Like, I didn't have the babysitter to go to the gym. If I wanted to go to the gym, it was like I was asking my husband to come home early. Like, I hadn't thought of the fact that I could pay the babysitter and go to yoga. So that's what I did on that day. I was like, "I wonder what my first step should be." And somebody across the office was like, "Well, what if you try out that new yoga studio?" Because this was also at the time when that was becoming a thing. Like, you used to have to go in, like, the Buddhist basement or whatever. And so I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." So I called the babysitter and was like, "I need 3 hours." And that was, like, revolutionary to me, but that's really the only step I took that day. And then I met the yoga teacher, and she was the one who told me maybe what I might consider eating. So I went to her house the next day, and we actually traded a website for her for all this knowledge. Like, that was how that played out.
Oh, hold on. You started to do a trade now. You
Yeah,
said like, let's help each other out. You help me with this, I
yeah,
help you with this. So let's pause right here because I need everybody to hear this really clearly about that personal accountability part,
yep,
right? That, but I don't want people to walk away saying, well, that must have been easy for Mia because she
no,
had a babysitter. Personal accountability, it seriously starts with you, detached from the situation that is going on around you. So I'd love to hear if you can speak to that person right now who's hearing this like, but I don't have a babysitter. I'm crossing, people can't see me, but I'm crossing my arms, right?
yeah.
I don't have a babysitter. So clearly this is not as easy for me as it was for Mia. What do you say to that woman?
Well, so it's kind of like at that moment, I was gonna solve it somehow, right? So that was the way I had. I already had a babysitter, so I already had that in place and I could do it. If I didn't have the babysitter, maybe I would have found a gym that had a day that could take my kids, which I did at some point during that whole thing. Or I could have decided to take off from work. Like, I could have decided to, if my kids had been in daycare, maybe I would have left work 2 hours. So it was a lot less. What happens, I feel like, when you're taking personal responsibility and you've really made a choice from the inside, so you're not doing it. I mean, I think that's the biggest mistake that happens, especially in the health industry, is it's like, "Oh, there's this solution out here and this solution over here," and we're hearing all this noise and we're making choices based on what's outside of us, like, not even what we really like, it's not coming from inside of us, it's coming from what we think we're supposed to do. So one of the most important things about that day was, like, I was hearing the voice from inside me. Nobody else was asking me to get healthy. Nobody else was saying that, you shouldn't be this tired or you shouldn't drink this many Starbucks. It was really coming from within me. And so from there, you see the possibility, like, you see the solution. And if I had have waited an hour, maybe a different solution would have come up. It was literally that there was a class 20 minutes from then. And so it was the thing I was gonna do. If it was 25 minutes later, who knows? Maybe I would have gone on a walk, but I really do believe that the next thing really would have happened. I only made one choice at a time, and I, like, just took that next step. And I really feel that when you make that kind of decision from the inside, something opens up and you're more susceptible to see it. Perhaps someone mentioned yoga 2 weeks before. I don't know, but I couldn't have heard it then.
What would make it easier for women to ask for what they need? That is such a hard thing to do,
Yeah.
especially because we're supposed to be superhuman.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to just take it all in and make it look easy. We're supposed to keep the house perfect, make the money, raise perfect children. I'm laughing at that. That was the one that made me laugh. Raise perfect children and make it look like it's effortless because that's what we're supposed to do. Why do we tell people to tell them that it's important to ask for what they need?
Well, I think that's back it's, like, literally the same thing, because that whole story of, like, we're supposed to be these perfect people, that's the outside story. That's what's happening in magazines. That's what's happening on Instagram. That's not true. Like, it's literally not the truth. It is what has been marketed to us, mostly by men because it's like their desire. It's
It's
their
it's their
dream.
dream.
It's
Oh,
their
I'm
dream,
so
right?
glad you said
It
that.
has nothing to do with
It's
us.
men's dream for us to have everything perfectly, like to be their executive assistant, essentially, like to be the one that lays out their whole life around them so that they can do their thing and everything else is taken care of. It is their
It
dream.
is their dream, and not that we're not some of us aren't married to the best man, like, I'm married to the best man, and that's not necessarily his dream, but all the things around us have been created, in this masculine model, so it's like some man's dream, that we're all this way. But what's super interesting about when you start to take responsibility, you calm down at a level, like, from the inside that we just can't when we're taking in all the noise. There's just too much noise, especially today, like, I think today is even harder than it was when I made this move 18 years ago, but, like, you know, it's just hard. So I feel like when we're in alignment and we really know what we need, we naturally ask for help. And it's different than when we're feeling like when we're coming from that place where we should be that perfect person and we're constantly on the outside making it look like, okay, I'm busy over here, so my spouse should be pulling more over here. And it creates this like tit for tat situation. But the second we take personal responsibility for what it is that we want, it's like even hard to explain, but we're showing up differently. And that's actually much more appealing to the people who love us. And they do things in different ways. It's really interesting. And another thing I will say about if it happens to be a woman in relationship with a man is that the masculine really wants to help the feminine. So we think that we're helping by not asking, but really our male counterparts are waiting for us to say what we actually want. And we're like holding it all in our head and thinking that they should just know.
Mhm.
But the second we ask, they show up so happily. Like I get my coffee made every single morning. It's the best. I don't even know how to use our coffee maker. I love it. But it's just because one day I was like, "Hey, you're really good at that. Can you make me coffee when you go downstairs?" And it's like, "Of course, sweetie, like, of course." Versus before I really knew that that's what I how I wanted to start my day, I'd be like, "God, I really wish someone would make me coffee. Like, why is it so hard? Like, why do we live so far away from the coffee place? Like, why do I have to have the extra 20 minutes to do this? Blah, 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 blah." Like the whole story.
I love that because that kind of makes a tie with this, super stereotypical thing about couples that, women want to talk and be validated, and that the man, again, total stereotypical situation, the man just wants to solve the problem.
Yeah.
It's like almost we can use that to our advantage so that they can actually help us with the things that we need help with
Yeah.
rather than the things that we don't need help with.
And people I mean, whether you're talking about your spouse or not, like, you could be talking about a somebody who's on your team or a kid once they get older, like, a friend, like, people want to help us.
Yeah.
They just need to know how. And so, the second that we're really clear on what it is that we want from the inside, it's much easier to ask for what you really need. Whereas I think when we're just sort of like, well, I want to make a lot of money and I want to be healthy, but we're not like really centered in that, it's much harder to ask for what it is that you want because you don't know.
So let me ask you this. After you get in touch with this yoga studio and you realize, hey, we can scratch each other's backs here. We can make your website. You help me with this meal stuff.
Yep.
One thing that comes to mind is that if there is one of the hardest things to do in life is to stick to a regimen to lose weight.
Mm,
This is a thing that you can read any book you want, watch every YouTube video, and months later, you may have lost 5 pounds, but you gained 10. It is so hard
yep.
for people to lose weight. So I'm very curious. I want to dive into your psyche of what made you stick with it? What were the things going on in your mind that made you go, no, this feels different?
Well, so going jumping ahead a little, when we created Plan Simple, which involves like our accountability program and a planner, I had to go back and really understand what happened. And what I did was I took that experience of getting healthy, because it was, like, a lot more than just the weight, I will say that, like, I had been on 2 medications that I just never thought I had to get off. I was off them within a week. I had seasonal allergies, like, I always took allergy medicine, never had them again. Like, just, like, every fall I would be like in tears. I haven't had that since. Just so many things. My cycle got regular, like all the things. So I took that experience and then I wrote this book. And I'm dyslexic, like, so I've been making books for people, like, that's how I started off as a designer, like, and so kind of in the back of my head, I guess, like, that seemed like a really cool thing to have your own book, but, like, writing I went to art school because I told myself I didn't know how to write, like, that's why I went to art school, so I could, like, create something visual. So that felt really impossible, and then I was, like, the least likely person. I mean, I had, as you heard, a nanny when my kids were little, so I was the least likely person to homeschool my kids for a year. And so I took those 3 experiences, which to me both felt all 3 felt really successful, and I was like, "Okay, did they have anything in common?" Because that's what I was really trying to cover, and they did. They had in common that I was really connected with how I wanted to feel. So it was less about my body looking a certain way, it was less about, anything that I thought needed to happen tomorrow, and it was really like, "Listen, I just wanna be like I wanna have energy. I wanna have energy for my kids. I wanna be healthy. I wanna be able to move. I wanna be able to, like" at the time they were little, so I was like, "I wanna be able to run around with them." Now I just went with my son to run I did not run. I supported him in doing an Ironman yesterday. I was like the
Wow.
coach, and I was like, "I don't wanna do an Ironman, but I wanna be strong enough where, like, I can be helpful and, like, go on adventures that a 20-year-old who wants to do an Ironman would also do, like, right? Like, he goes to the rock climbing gym and whatever. Like, I wanna be able to do those things. And so it became about that. And same with my book. With my book, it was really like I want everybody to be able to sit down and have dinners with their family. Like, I know this is possible for everybody if we just start to think about it in a different way. And I actually didn't know that there were people who weren't at the time that I was thinking about the book. It wasn't really till I went on the book tour and I was like, oh, this actually really is not normal. And really until my kids went to college, and I have 2 in college right now, and they're all home. And we eat dinner every night still, like, it's a habit that's served us in all sorts of situations. And so it was really about that, that future pull, like, it was like my future was pulling me forward instead of I was, like, stuck right there. So that was a really important aspect of it. And then the other important aspect was I kept it super simple. So I think the mind wants to just have the result right away, right?
Right.
It's like, "Okay, I decided today that I wanna, like, be healthy and lose this weight, so tomorrow that should be my truth." But it's like, no, that's not how it works. It's a process. So it's like, "Okay, what are the 3 things I'm gonna do today that are gonna move me toward this thing?" And I did that every single day for 4 months, and it was just like until it became a habit. I mean, I do that every day. I've been doing that every day for, like, 15 years, but, like, it was like, "Okay, like, these are the 3 things I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna go to that yoga class. I'm going to eat this for breakfast, lunch, and dinner," and I would just make these little mini agreements with myself, and then I would make sure I had the time, right? So then it's like, "Okay, what needs to happen so that this actually can happen?" And so that was true in all 3 scenarios. And so that's really what became Plan Simple.
What do you think the most challenging part of like all of these things was? I'm so fixated on the weight loss because
Mm,
I just know there's people listening who are like, I wish, you know what? I just heard you say that I need to have a clear vision of
mhm.
what I want. Great. But as soon as I start on day one, it is so hard to stay on it. I'd love to hear what do you think was like the most challenging part of actually sticking with it?
So what's super interesting is I had definitely been somebody like, this was the first time in my life where this much weight had accumulated, but I feel like I was born into the diet culture,
Mhm.
so I knew about every diet, and I had tried every diet, like, just to lose 5 or 10 pounds before, but, like, I was very aware of that culture. I had done the thing where on Sunday night, I'm like, "Okay, what's the plan for this?" "Which is the one for this week?" And I had beat myself up and not felt very great in my body. But this time, it was very different. Like, I never it's really interesting, but I never questioned that part because the thing about the vision, like, the important thing about having the vision is I spent 30 minutes every morning, uh, connecting to the vision. So it's not like I just magically had a vision and it stayed with me. It's like that's what I spent my time doing. So I didn't spend my time worried about, like, how I was gonna make lunch, or I didn't spend my time worried I was gonna be hungry. I really spent my time both connecting to the future vision, and then this is the other part that's really important, just calming myself down before I was making any choices about food or exercise or any of the things that played into this health transformation. Because I think what happens in weight loss and entrepreneurship is that oftentimes we're making choices when we're basically distressed.
Mhm.
Like, so we're making these choices when we're hungry or we're stressed out that we think we can't have something that we think we really want in that moment, and that's when we're deciding what we can have for dinner or what we can have for breakfast the next day. And so really where I put my energy was calming myself down, like just really getting centered, connecting to that vision, and then making choices from this calm energy. So I just stayed focused on that, and it really made the other pieces, it just kept making me be able to show up.
I feel like that's such an important point that you made is how your brain works.
Yeah,
Because when your brain is stressed, it doesn't have enough it's too much cognitive load to make a big decision,
yeah,
right? Like it needs to be in a point of ease for it to make a decision that is going to be better for you. So what you're describing right now is basically working with your brain to make sure you are going to continue to make the right decision,
yeah,
right? Even I've been on diets. I've done the whole thing, and you know how easy it is to just roll through the McDonald's drive-through and just take care of this hunger right now. That is so easy. But what you're describing is, you're probably doing that because you're hungry,
yeah.
because you're stressed, because there's all these other things happening.
Or because you haven't decided. So that's the important part. Like, I just always say that planning is just deciding in advance. So when I'm like calm and focused on my future, that's when I make my meal plan for the next day. Right. So that's when I'm making those choices. And so, do I ever hit the moment and be like, "Oh my gosh, I would so much rather have this other thing for lunch than what I planned for." Of course, I'm like human, like, so of course I have those things. But the story then I get to remind myself is, but I already decided. Like, I decided in a moment when I was totally nurtured and I was totally okay and I was safe. And right now, something's feeling triggered or not safe. And that's why I'm wanting to deviate from that. And so I can really like talk to myself and understand that I already made a choice. I don't have to choose again. And I think some of the times it's like we're making these choices in the moment and we don't have the capacity to make them in that moment.
What is a better way to go? How do you go about planning in advance and making these decisions in advance?
Well, so the most important part of when you sit down to plan is you have to take care of being calm. Like, so that's the skill that I think is the most important to develop. It's like, what do you need to be calm? And it's different for every situation. So, like, you know, when I was remaking how I was showing up to my health, and, it had been a long time that I had had these other habits. Like, by the way, when I did this, I really didn't cook for my kids. Like, the reason a lot of this was coming up was my husband had been the cook, but we were finally at this point where the kids actually needed to have dinner at a certain time, and I was going and getting, like, frozen food and all the things. I just didn't know how to pull it all together. Did not have that skill. And so I think that I was always making these, like, really rush decisions from this place of not feeling very great about myself because I didn't have this skill. So I think it's really about taking that time to just calm down, get centered. And so during that time for me, I did end up going to a lot of yoga classes. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna lie. Like, it was like it was a big effort to get calm. A yoga class is an hour and then you have to get there and get back and all the things. So I was putting a big time commitment into centering. When I'm deciding like, okay, we're about to head into a launch. What are the three things I'm gonna do today? It's sometimes it's like as simple as 30 seconds of breathing, right? Like, so it doesn't have to be complicated, but we run like it's like I almost think of it as like an accordion. Like, sometimes we run into things that are more, there's some trauma behind them or there's some real big mindset hurdles that need to go overcome. And so sometimes getting centered around those things takes a therapy session
Right.
or time with your coach or, a longer breathing exercise or meditation. And sometimes it's as simple as just pausing for 30 seconds so you can like catch yourself and be like, okay, I'm here now. I'm consciously making this choice. I'm not making it from my past anything. I'm making it from right now, who I am right now. What's that choice?
How did Plan Simple meals turn into just let's fix all of these things in our life so we can have the best life possible? How did you make that pivot out of meals?
Yeah, so I very quickly realized that, like, I mean, I had just learned how I made this book, which does have some recipes in it, but, like, I didn't know how to cook, like, a year before I decided to jump into all this, so, like, it was all new. And so as, Instagram started coming on board and Pinterest and all the things, and, like, more people started stepping out of the woodwork, like, I held on to the food thing for a couple years, but then I just started meeting all these incredible people and just realizing that that wasn't, like, my thing. Like, that wasn't I don't go looking at food videos. Like, I was eating because it made me feel good. And when I really got clear, I was like, "So what's really happening?" And actually, it's funny 'cause, somebody who at the time who's a mutual friend of ours walked into my house one day when I was sort of in the transition, and she's a coach. And she was like, you know, "You could package this up and sell this." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "It's just you have 3 little kids, and it's so calm in your house." And I was like, "Oh." And I realized that, like, there's the food piece, but there was also my choice to be an entrepreneur. And then there was, like, this lifestyle that we were leading, and part of that at the time was, like, my kids didn't have technology, and, like, we had done this whole thing. And there was this piece of calming, there was this spiritual component to it, and I was like, it's those 4 pieces together that really even make like, you need all of them. Like, I needed all of them, and I was like, maybe that's what I'm here to do, like, is to really show people how food is foundational, like, health is foundational, and I was seeing how all these people were trying to change their food, but they weren't willing to change the other pieces. And I could see that, like, I'm a puzzle putter together, so I was like, "I'm really here to put that whole puzzle together." But I think because I didn't have the food piece personally, like, I needed to get that piece online, so I sort of, like, veered off in that direction for a little bit, and then I was able to bring it all back together.
So, what are the other pieces? There's health and how you nourish your body. What are all the other pieces?
There's lifestyle, so that's sort of like how you show up to your surroundings, whether that's relationships, family, home, right? So that's your lifestyle. We needed an acronym, which we call FLOW. So the F is for food and wellness, the L is for lifestyle, and the O is for OM, which is the spirituality piece. So it's like mindset, spirituality, self care, like those pieces, which I think are equally as important as the other, and work. So how we show up to our work as entrepreneurs. And how we can bring all those pieces together and how they really feed off of each other, right? Like if I have a huge goal in business and everything else is out of whack, it's really hard to make that work goal work out. And it's not like everything needs like equal. So we talk a lot about work life wellness balance. And I get a lot of pushback on that sometimes in
Mhm.
the world because a lot of people really push back against this idea of work-life balance.
Mhm.
But I think when we're talking about it as a society, we're talking about the outside version of work-life balance. And so we see it as like a timeline, right? So it's like, if I'm working this much, then I should have this much life, like, and so eventually we hit this thing that we live in 24 hours and that can't be very balanced, right?
Mhm.
But if we think about it as more of like the weight, right, and how much weight something has in our lives, then it doesn't really matter about how much time it takes. It's just we want all 4 of those aspects to feel balanced from the inside. And I might, put 7 hours of podcasting into a day and then go for a walk and make sure I've checked in with a family member and that's balance, but I've thought about it in advance and I can see the balance and then I can really like live into it with my head and my heart.
For some of us who experience chaos in a lot of those areas
Yeah.
every day, I would love for you to really paint a picture for us for what a balanced day would even look like, if you will indulge me on that?
Sure. So first of all, I wanna say that I think it looks different for everybody. So and I think that's really important because, again, don't forget, it's like the inside out. But what I do think is important is that and I'll give you, like, the difference of maybe of how it is now and how it would have been a few years ago. When my kids were younger, I knew that I needed to focus on, like, that centering piece, and everything around me was like, "You should have a morning routine." If I hear that one more time, I don't know. Like, "You should have a morning routine," but the problem is that I, at the time, had a one baby who got up at 6 AM, and then there was somebody in school, and so it was, like, from 6 AM to 8:30 AM, like, I'd have to wake up at 4, and I
Mhm.
was tired, and I didn't wanna wake up at 4, and there was times when I tried it and tried to see if it would work, and it did not for me, and especially at that time. So, I would drop them off at school, and then I would take an hour for myself before I started work. So, I had to get over that idea that work starts at 9, which I don't know why I felt that so strongly, but I will admit I did, and I was working for myself. Nobody else was checking when I was getting to work. But so I think it's important that all of those things get touched on in a day at some level. So it's like, how are you centering yourself? And I personally love doing that first thing. There was moments when I couldn't foresee how to do that, like where I would drop kids off and then I would have a client meeting, right? And so then there wasn't time to do that. So then sometimes I would move it to the night before and I would like do the night before for the next day just so I could like carry that forward. But it's like there needs to be this piece of centering. And for me, that looks like meditation. I love journaling. But it can be very different for different people. So sometimes walking or working out makes people centered, or sometimes for extroverts, connecting with somebody makes them centered. Like there's no right or wrong way. That is not me. I like being alone when I'm getting centered, but everybody has their path. So you really have to ask yourself that. And I always spend some time every day, whether it's like literally 30 seconds, just like closing my eyes and just imagining my future or sometimes I'll write about it, and that takes a little bit longer, but I always connect to my future vision. And then I always plan the I always I would say replan. I always replan the day the night before, because that helps me redecide, like, what's happening the next day. So oftentimes I've planned my week. I've planned my week based on a seasonal goal I have. I love 90-day goals. So, like, oftentimes I'm basing it on something I know I'm moving toward. But every day I check in because we all have weird things that happen. So last week I pulled my back out. Some days my kids are sick. Sometimes we're more tired than we thought we would be, or somebody cancels something. So I always recommit to my day. So it's like there's this level of like needing to commit on a regular basis to what we say that we want. And I take that pretty seriously on a daily basis. Like, okay, I'm recommitting. Like, yes, it's going to rain tomorrow and I would love to lie in bed and watch Netflix. But that doesn't really align with my future self this week. There might be a week where actually that does align, and that's okay. But, like, this week it doesn't. So I'm just always making sure that those things are happening. The other thing I do every day is I recommit to my working hours, like, so to the boundaries that I'm creating. So, like, this is the container of time I would like to work, and this one is hard for me. I could work sometimes long. I love what I do, and
Right.
so sometimes I can put extra time into things, but then I do wanna be a great mom. I want the kids to know that I'm there for them. I wanna be in an amazing relationship with my husband, like, I wanna move my body, like, I also want those things. So I do work often on the boundaries and really time blocking and being like, "Okay," like, if I find this is easier actually over the course of a week, but just, like, really looking at the week and understanding when I'm working and when I'm having downtime. But a lot of it's really about making those choices in advance and then sticking by them. Like, that's the work each day for me is like, "All right, Mia, you said you're gonna stop at 3 today and go swimming. So do it."
Where do people stand if they have had problems, challenges in the past with sticking with things? If they're hearing this podcast and they're like, you know what, it sounds great. I'm going to create a routine where I am centering myself, where I'm calming myself down so I can make better decisions. I am planning my day the night before. But these things are new habits
Yeah.
that people create, and creating habits can be, difficult if you haven't, a habit is not a habit the first day,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who are like, I wish I could stick to something
Yeah.
like that?
So the first thing is you have got to make it doable for you. So that's where you really have to check in. Like, how is this doable? So here's the secret to my health thing. I ate the same thing every day for 4 months. Like, every single day. I didn't know how to cook, remember? So it was like, she told me that you should, like, start the day, like, this way. You should have this juice and then this fruit. Like, and I ate the same thing every single day. Luckily, this person who was helping me also had a restaurant, so every, like, once a week, I would go get something different for dinner, but pretty much it was, like, the same thing, and, I've coached people who are like, "Well, that would be boring," and I'm like, "Great," but I literally could not have stuck to it and made things, so I was willing to be bored in order to stick to it, right? So, like, I was making that choice. So we have to make it doable, and that, like, for me, I needed to go all in and figure out how to make all in doable, and for me, that was like, great. I don't change things. It could be like I have a uniform if I'm stressed out about what I'm wearing or whatever, like there's different versions of that, but it's like that's how I made it doable. So it has to be doable. For other people, it might be like, okay, so there are these 5 things that I need to add to my life. I'm just going to start with being hydrated, and that makes it doable. And then the next week, you work on breakfast, and the next week, you work on sleep. Like, I don't feel like there's a right or wrong way unless it really doesn't feel like you can do it in your life. And that's sort of an internal thing. So that's the first thing. The other big mistake I think that we make, and it's just because it's what we've learned, is that women tend to be very great list makers, list writers.
Mm.
And so we write these long lists of all the habits, all the things, and it's become what I think a lot of people refer to as the endless to-do list because it's just literally not possible to do in a day. So one of the other really important things I think always, but especially with new things, is to really anchor them in time. So it's like, yeah, use that creative process of list writing to like get all the ideas out and figure out what it is that you want. But then when you've said you want to drink water, you got to figure out how to anchor in time. So that could look like setting 3 alarms on your phone so that you're reminded 3 times to drink the water. It could be that if you need to exercise, you just go to your calendar and you make sure that the exercise class is in your calendar so that you go to it. And so I think that that's a really important piece because oftentimes we stack all these things that all these habits that we wanna create, but if you and this is what happened on the book tour, this is what I realized, is that everybody was wanting, like, to have family dinner, but if they really looked at their schedule, they were, like, ending work, and they were supposed to be a half an hour away picking up their kids from Little League at the time that they were finishing, and then they were walking in the door an hour after they wanted to have dinner and mad at themselves that they weren't all sitting down, but it's, like, literally not even possible
Mhm.
in the time that we live in. Like, that's the piece of being human, right? It's like we live on this planet in a 24-hour cycle day, and so we really have to anchor what we want in that time.
Yeah. So what is next for Plan Simple?
Ooh, so we are noticing so what we do is we really hold people accountable because I think one of the other important pieces of follow through for women doing so many things is that we really don't have to do it alone, right? Like, we can't do it alone, and so we sort of solve that piece while people are getting their own, people in line to help them and support them. But the people who love us the most, by the way, don't always want us to change. Like they want us to be our best, but the change is just as scary to them as it is to us. And so that's sort of where we stepped in and we're finding that it's looking a little different in this post-pandemic era than it was we were doing this before the pandemic, but pre and then during the pandemic because I think our relationship to sort of our capacity for being online and being on Zoom is shifting a little bit. And so we're really trying to meet that with some new tools that are accountability, but in really frequent less you have to be their ways so that people really feel like we get told I get told all the time, like, "You're just that voice on my shoulder." It's like reminding me that this is actually what I want, and so we still wanna be that, but I think it's shifting how we do it, so that's definitely changing a bit. And then our paper planner, which has served us very well and will continue to serve us, but we're ready to make it digital. So those are like the big things that are coming up.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for doing all this. I just have two more questions for you.
absolutely.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have of you as the queen of planning a simple life?
Oh, that I actually innately plan. So I am like the most by nature, like in human design, if anybody knows that, I'm a manifesting generator. I'm a creative who went to art school, which means I have a different idea at every moment. I'm an entrepreneur, which also means I have a different idea at every moment. I move fast and I'm not organized by nature, but I really want to fulfill some of those dreams that are constantly queuing themselves up in my head. And so I've found a way that works for me that actually responds to who I am as a woman, that comes from a more feminine energy, and that, yeah, that really allows me to get things done. But without this, like this was what I needed. This isn't how I would live. So I feel like that's the that's the biggest thing.
I like that's refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the right personality to
No.
actually be able to enable all these tools. And finally, if everybody who's listening, they really related to this topic, what do you think is the one thing they need to do in the next 24 hours?
Oh, that's such a good question. So in the next 24 hours, so can I give you 2 answers?
Yes.
Okay. So I think there's 2 things. So if you're somebody who feels like you've lost track of what you want, I think that's the most powerful thing you can do. And I think that happens for a lot of mothers because we spend so much time helping the people in our household get what they want that we lose that just like it's like that flame fizzles. So spending just even a half an hour sitting down and just writing on the top of a piece of paper, what do I want? And seeing if anything comes out. And if it doesn't, just keep asking the paper the question and see what happens, like, see where it is, see where you are, see what it is that you really want, and let yourself be surprised, and in 24 hours, I think that's enough, but don't hide from it right away, like, there's so many people out there that can help you, like, fulfill that, so don't let it scare you yet, but I think that's a really powerful exercise. For anyone who already sort of knows what they want and, that's how your brain operates, yet you're still living in this life where you're sort of feeling a little bit in survival mode, a little bit scrambly, definitely a bit overwhelmed. I think the most important thing you can do in 24 hours is before you go to bed, write down how you want the next day to feel. What are 3 things you can do to make it feel that way? And then literally put them in time. And I think that that will change everything for you tomorrow.
Thank you so much for doing this. Please, Mia, tell everybody where they can go follow you. And if you have anywhere where people can get more resources and find out more about Plan Simple, where should they go?
Awesome. So the best place is our website, which is plansimple.com. We have a free course there, so you can come take it, and it's all about planning your day. So if you like the little tidbits I shared about that, that's what the course is about. And we are on Instagram at plansimple.co. And I feel like those are the best 2 places. And we have a podcast. We have a podcast that Ina has been on.
That's right.
And so it's called Plan Simple, and it's really about the shortcuts on the other side. So I'm taking a stand for everyone deciding what they want from the inside. And then I think sometimes it can be really helpful to have support to get it. And so that's what we do on the podcast.
Love it. And we're going to put all of those links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Mia.
Thank you so much for having me. This is wonderful and so fun to be in person.
I know, this
I
is
know.
great. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. And please remember to subscribe to the Superhumans podcast. And I will see you on the next one.